Yo! I'm changing up the intro. Welcome to Levels Plus Whenever, episode 86. I've been thinking about what to talk about this particular episode, and I just got through all of the remakes of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4. So I want to talk about them, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and why 2 and 4, I think, managed to surpass their originals for the most part, and how 3 is fascinating, we will say. I also got some pickups, and I also want to talk about my 11th book that just came out this week. So we'll start with the pickups first. I have Super Mario RPG for the Switch. My experience with Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo is I got to the Axel Rangers and they kicked my butt, and then I just didn't want to even deal with it anymore, so I didn't. So I sold the card. But I do like the game quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to playing through it again with the modern concessions. Alright, my shirt may have given a little bit away, but this week was also Deep Cut Amiibo week, so I got Shiver and Fry, and Big Man is on his way via the mail because I couldn't get him at Best Buy. And here is Ganondorf Tears of the Kingdom amiibo as promised. All of them are really good. I'm very happy with them. And then when I was at Target yesterday, they happened to have an Agatha Harkness figure from WandaVision, and I love WandaVision, and she was fantastic. Catherine Hahn really just killed it with that character, so happy to add her to my Marvel collection. Book 11, Isolated Volume 1, is available on Amazon. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. Amazon does have a decent preview of the book as well, which is kind of nice. I don't know if I've ever had that happen before. Maybe because it's a conventional book size for once. I don't know. But I've been working on Isolate for 20 years, and I'm so happy to finally be able to publish the beginning of this story. It began in a creative writing class in 2003, and it's evolved a lot since then, but a lot of these characters have been around for that long. Both Julia, who's on the right, and Celeste, who's on the left, have been there since the beginning. And I'm really happy with how well the book has turned out and how much joy it brings me to have this book out in the world. It means so much to have this project moving along. So I just wanted to give a little preview here on Levels Plus Whenever. Here's the title page. This particular book project started last year, and I've been working on it off and on over the year. The big thing was getting art for it. So like the art that is in the early parts of the book is actually older from earlier drafts that I was still pretty happy with. But if we get to the end of the book, it's all new. I did it this year. This is as far as the Amazon preview goes, and I don't want to spoil the story. So it's a fully illustrated novel. It's about 200 pages. It's from Julia's perspective. It's a voice I really like writing as. I think it is the pinnacle of my writing and my artistic endeavors thus far. I'm super, super stoked to be able to get this book out there. And I hope that you might consider picking it up. It is on Amazon in paperback and in Kindle formats. So, Resident Evil remakes. It kind of feels like I just talked about RE, and I did. 2 episodes ago. But I have just genuinely been very impressed with the remakes a lot, that I wanted to devote some time just on them. I will refer a little bit to the original RE remake, since that was kind of like the benchmark I think all of these have been trying to go up against. 2 of the 3 are successful at what they do. One is far less successful because it lost a lot of its ideas to another one. Sure, you probably know which one I'm referring to. But let's go ahead and start with the one that I think is the weakest, and that's Resident Evil 3. And there's a lot of reasons why this could be considered the weakest. Out of the 3 games that have been remade recently, Nemesis was probably the weakest of those entries as well. But that doesn't mean that the remake should have fallen into the same trap. And it kind of fell into different snares than the original game. So, let me explain why. Basically, what RE3 feels like, it feels like a downloadable content package that was bloated out to make it into a full retail product. That's its biggest problem, is that Jill's adventure is not as dense of a remake as 2 and especially 4. And it shows. It feels less polished, and I don't like using the term polished when I talk about a game. But in contrast to 2, like, the cutscenes aren't as smooth. The gameplay feels just a little bit off. There's some mechanical things that don't flow as well as 2 or 4. The biggest strength I think 3 has is the dodge mechanic, and I rarely used it. But when you do use it and you pull it off well, it's really fun. But I forget that it's there because it's the only game that has it. But a lot of what made the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis unique from 2 is lost here. There's no branching paths. Nemesis is far less random. In fact, he's very plot specific where he shows up. You don't have the ability to choose a choice, basically, in game with a temporary stop of time. There's some big areas that have been cut out. But for me, I think one of the bigger issues with RE3 Remake is how it handles Jill. I don't think it handles Jill very well. I feel like Jill is trying to out-torture porn Lara Croft in the original Tomb Raider remake. She's getting thrown around everywhere and taking on levels of damage that I don't think a normal human would be able to sustain and continue walking away from. It feels the most RE6 of the 3 remakes. And that's saying something because RE4 is the most actiony of them all, and yet it's Jill that's the one who is getting ping-ponged out of car crashes, thrown through buildings, flying from explosions, getting the worst crap thrown at her. Like, I don't understand. It's almost like the people who were working on RE3 had some sort of fetish about Jill being strangled, because she gets like put into like 4 different chokeholds in this game. And one of them involves ingesting maggots. That cutscene was so unnecessary. It was very clear from all of the descriptors and environmental clues that that's what the brain suckers are going to do to you. Did not need a cutscene forcing one of them on Jill. That was just so unnecessary. And with Nemesis, he loves to try to tentacle choke slam Jill, especially in the later parts of the game. But the way that the cinematics handle that is weird. So I want to provide an example without actually showing it. So let's say that, since I've got some paper here, that this sketch is Nemesis, right? And so I've got my phone, which is a knife, and instead of attacking where my neck isn't, she's like this. And I'm like, that tentacle is not that thick. That tentacle is not that hard. You would be cutting yourself open. It looks so strange, and it definitely does not have the smoothness of like RE2's cutscenes. And especially with a couple of the ones towards the end of the game with Nemesis, they look really weird, and the way Jill deals with the situation, it's like, why? Why are you stabbing at your neck? There's other parts of you that you could go for. It breaks a lot of the immersion of being, as Carlos would call her, a super cop. When that is your instinct to defend yourself, is to stab your own neck. It's nothing against the voice actors. The voice actors did a spectacular job. I think Nicole Tompkins does Jill. She did a great job. And Carlos's voice actor, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head, did so well he became Chris Redfield in Village. So it's clear that the voice work is great, and the script is okay. This one in particular seemed a little bit more edgelord than 2 or definitely 4. 4 actually toned down the edgelord a lot, which I appreciate. 4 definitely toning it down, but 2 didn't seem as... This game just feels like it's wanting to be the edgy one because it's got Nemesis in it. So the writing reflects that. There's a lot more F's, FU's, there's a lot more B words. It's unnecessary. And it does Jill a disservice because it really just kind of frames her in an unsympathetic light, with her being like muscled around so much by Nemesis and just being thrown around through all this stuff. I didn't connect with Jill the way that I connected with Leon and Claire. And, granted, that's always been the case. I've always had a preference for Leon and Claire as the protagonists of RE over Jill and Chris. But I don't think RE3 manages to make Jill a character that you could root for, and that's sad for me because I think that there's a lot of potential with Jill in this game that's just kind of squandered. It's also, I think, a bit more sexist, I'll say. There's more fan service, I feel, in this game than in 2 or in 4. I feel like the camera really likes Jill's butt in this game. In contrast to 2, where I didn't feel that with Claire, and in contrast to 4, where they made great strides to not emphasize that with Ashley. Separate Ways does a little bit with Ada, but it's not as bad or as prominent as it is in 3 with Jill. But there's just stuff about 3 that feels incomplete. The zombies, for example, they don't deconstruct the same way in 2. And because you have an infinite knife in 3, for some reason, they decided to scrap the knife break mechanic that they decided to pioneer with 2 and carry on into 4, but not included in 3. So Jill's got an infinite knife, which basically it does kind of make the game feel a little less stressful in that regard. Enemies just don't deconstruct the same way. Like with RE2, you could use your knife and actually like cut parts of zombie limbs off. You can't do that really in 3. You can shoot them, but it still doesn't feel as good. They did add some new models, but a lot of the ones from 2 are being reused. It really feels like with 3, the big thing they were trying to do is the number of zombies coming at you in a couple parts, more than the actual terror of tearing apart someone, which I think is a big part of why RE2's fighting is more successful. I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but I feel like Jill doesn't control as well as Leon or Claire. I feel like there's just little tiny gameplay and mechanical things in this game that just make Jill feel worse to play as. And the level design is uninspired. It's there's very little new material in the city, which I think was a big part of what made Nemesis interesting, was that it explored Raccoon City a lot broader than RE2 original did. And here you get like a I can't even call it a block, a section, a half block, a miniature piece of a block, that you just, that's it, really. It's like you explore this one area after you get out of your apartment, and then you're on your way to other stuff. And then you're in a different part of the city, but all the content that was in the city for that part's gone, save a boss fight. So no clock tower, no graveyard, no park. It's just like, here is this little thing next to a bridge, and then all of a sudden you're fighting Nemesis, and then you're back at a hospital. So yeah, it's just like the exploration part is really missing in this game. It really feels like you're looping over the same stuff a lot. Carlos is really well integrated, I will say that. He does have 2 sections in this game versus the one in Nemesis. And he gets to explore RPD, which is kind of fun, because he sets up some of the stuff that happens in RE2. So like the locker room hole, that's him. He did that hole. You get to see how Marvin got attacked. It's by Brad, which is, I think, a good change. But on the whole, it's like there's just stuff about RE3 that feels rushed and unfinished, and it's throughout the entire game. Like Jill feeling a little bit off, and the way that when you pick stuff up, you can't combine it. If you pick it up, it just goes into your inventory and then it closes, which is annoying. The hospital siege section, whew, that part is such... If I can't think of too many other parts in a AAA game that scream out, we need to pad this. You have to protect the barricaded room where Tyrell and Jill are. As Jill recovers from the... what is the Nemesis virus? I don't remember what its specific branch is. While she is taking in the vaccine for the virus. And Tyrell is trying to do some tech stuff. So you basically have to defend the lobby, and there's like 4 open windows. But the zombies do a unique splatter explosion animation here because the game can't handle having all those bodies in one place. And it throws a whole bunch of loot in there that you've already wandered through that room multiple times, but now there's suddenly more loot in there. And that's actually another thing, but I'll come back to that. And then it just feels long and drawn out. It's not very fun. And you're just shooting. It's basically you're holding the base type of thing. but it's without anyone else to help you, and it's really unexciting. Because the only real like, changes that it brings is 2 hunters into the dynamic, and that's just the biggest issue with 3 though. On the whole though, is it just definitely feels unfinished, and that they had to get it out the door to hit a fiscal year mark, because I think it came out in like March of 2020. It sold well, but it definitely feels like it was a project that began life as an expansion to RE2, and they decided to make it a full thing, but they didn't have the time to make it a full thing. It was also not Capcom internal that was the primary developer on it. It was M2. No, not that one. M2 spelled out with a dash in between. Not the retro enthusiast company that does a lot of retro compilations for like Konami and other companies. They were, I think, the head studio, and they were actually going to be the head studio on 4 until the critical response on 3 came out, and then Capcom made it internal, and it's a really good thing they did. This is not a knock against that studio. They're relatively new. They're not as experienced. They were learning RE Engine, I think, in this process, and they did an okay job. It's a good game, but it could have been a great game. And I think that's the part that really hurts, is that sandwiched between 2 and 4, which are 2 fantastic remakes of 2 iconic games of a legendary franchise at this point, it's got issues, and they are just transparent. There's no real hiding the fact that 3 is a rushed, incomplete, less successful game than 2. And then 4. And it's unfortunate, because I think that the biggest thing that was working against 3 was Nemesis. And why is that? It's because RE2 took Nemesis's gimmick and gave it to Mr. X. So the development team were like, oh, we can't do the same thing with Nemesis. We have to do something different. And that's the problem. That's where it all went wrong with RE3, is that they felt they couldn't do the same thing twice. So they changed Nemesis to be plot specific, appears at certain points determinedly, and is a worse Mr. X. He has a tentacle, which he will grab you from across the room or the area and pull you towards him, but not do anything. He'll just stop you from moving and just pull you on the ground and then leave you in a crumple state, and you have to wiggle to get back up. That's annoying. He also can suddenly jump in front of you when he's behind you, or vice versa. He can leap behind you, and then that makes it difficult to deal with him, because all of a sudden he's not there anymore. He doesn't drop anything. He's just there to annoy the player. And then he's hardly there. He's hardly there to do that. He only does it like one time, I think, once or twice, that he actually shows up and antagonizes Jill without a gun. Every other time he then appears, he's basically a boss fight or a scripted run through an area. That's not what Nemesis was about. Nemesis was about being a constant menace and making you feel like he could show up anywhere. And they did that with Mr. X and RE2 Remake. So it really just feels like everything about 3 is a compromise to 2. And with the extra edgelord, the extra fan service, male gaze perspective that the game has, alongside just it's feeling like a incomplete, padded on DLC turned into a full game. It ultimately is good but it's disappointing. And it's going to probably be in my most disappointing list because I feel like between 2 and 4, it's not there. It is not on the level of 2 or 4. Let's go back to 2 since these two games are so connected. 2 is really something special. I'm going to go ahead and give my biggest critique out of the way first, is that the biggest critique I have with the RE2 remake is that it streamlines the I forget what the official term is, but basically the A to B system that the original RE2 had, which is let's say you play the game as Leon. You play Leon A. So you'll go through the campaign as Leon A, and then when you play as Claire B, you will basically be running concurrently with Leon A, doing your own stuff. You don't cross paths super often, but you will have different experiences because you're doing different stuff. So you'll have different bosses, you'll have different rooms and key situations that you have to sort out. It's a very cool system that I like a lot. I think it's the Zap system, I think is what they called it. And then if you did Claire A, then Leon B is also a little bit different. And then Mr. X shows up in the Bs. They got rid of that. It's technically there. They just call it Second Run, but it's still the same game, more or less, if you play it as Leon A or Claire A or Leon B or Claire B. Leon and Claire have a set course that they play in either mode that has only the subtlest of differences if you're doing it A or B. So Claire will be dealing with Mr. X at the beginning, but then you'll be dealing with G the rest of the game. And Leon deals with Mr. X more, and that's his final boss, is Mr. X. So that doesn't change if you're in Second Run or not. That's always the same. It's just subtle things are going to be different. Mr. X will show up earlier than he does in both characters' campaigns, for example, and there's like 1 or 2 other minor changes. So it doesn't really feel like the two characters are in the same space at the same time the way that it did in RE2 original. So that's a bummer. That is probably one of the, if in terms of a classic perspective, that's one of the biggest losses. The other big loss is that the bestiary, so to speak, in RE2 Remake is lacking in contrast to RE2 Classic. That's one thing that RE3 did better, is that they had more enemy variety, and they pulled in practically everything from RE2 on top of what they already had. But RE2 has zombies. Lots of zombies. You'll have lickers, which were essential. If you didn't have the lickers, it would be disappointing. There's the G adults and the G young, which are kind of new. They used to be a boss, but they kind of promoted them into being an enemy. You have the Ivy zombies, which take the plant creatures from RE2 and make them into fleshy equivalents, basically. And that's it. And dogs. There are dogs too. I shouldn't cut the dogs out. So, no crows. There are some crows in the game. You hear them, but you don't fight them. They're not an enemy. The moth mini boss is gone entirely. The plant creatures are gone. There's no spiders in the sewer at all. And I want to say that there's one other enemy that is just magically gone, and I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. So it does hurt the game a little bit that it's basically a lot of the same stuff. And since there's probably like a good 10 to 12 zombie models, so you kind of start seeing the same ones after a while. Maybe more like 20, but it feels like 10 to 12. So the enemy variety is lacking. Other than that, I think that RE2 outdoes the original game on every other level. I think that the level design and the puzzles are excellent. I think making Mr. X a bigger part of the tension is a great decision. And he makes the police station far more engaging. The characterization is spectacular in this game. Claire and Leon are super well casted. They are wonderfully performed. They have a really great dynamic in this game, and I was rooting for both of them. As a Leon Claire stan, apparently, I'm very happy about that. I think the way that Ada and Sherry are in this game is fantastic. Sherry is probably the most terrifying piece of any RE gameplay because it's so real. It's too real, honestly. Having to run from a man who is clearly a sociopath and is clearly a misogynist. There's some issues there, and it makes Sherry's piece so tense. I actively am reviled by Brian Irons in this game. He was a bit of a comical doof in the original, but he's like menacing in like the worst ways. He's such an asshole. And you feel no sympathy towards him, which is exactly how it should be. I think the dynamic between Annette and William Birkin is really interesting in this game. You get a different Annette kind of for Leon versus Claire. For Leon, it's scientist Annette only, and then when you have her Claire and you're dealing with mommy Annette, turns out she's not particularly great at either. And then I think William's motivation is much stronger here to do what he's doing to become G. And I guess that's another thing about RE3. It really just adds like this extra lab out of nowhere with characters that weren't really referenced into. It is a little weird. Anyway, we're on to. The boss fights are great. I think that they are all super fun and really engaging. I think that the pacing in it is really well done. It doesn't feel like you're stuck in one place for too long. So you're moving pretty quick through stuff. It would have been nice to have a little bit more time in the city, especially after RE3 kind of fumbled that ball as well. Because if you, all Route B or second run always starts at the police station, so you don't even get the city in second run. Really, you get like the little bit once you're out of the police station to get to the destination that you're going to, depending on the character, and that's it. So that's a little disappointing because I think that's one thing that the classic RE2 and RE3 did better is the fact that you're in Raccoon City. It doesn't really feel like you're in Raccoon City as much in the remakes, but that's okay. I think that all of the changes to the story were for the better. I think that again, Claire and Leon are really great characters. They got unique weapon sets. Claire seems to move a little bit faster, and Leon seems to tank a little bit more damage. I think that's the only real difference. But I played through RE2 through all 4 routes concurrently. So I basically started Claire A, then I did Leon A, and then I did Claire B, and I did Leon B. All in a row. I played through Claire A on standard, and then I played through the rest on assisted. I also did RE3 on assisted, just to kind of get through them a little bit faster. I wanted to try it at standard to kind of just get the vibe, and then I was like, I'll just do all the other routes on assisted because it'll be a little bit faster. I just think that Capcom nailed it, honestly, though. Other than my nitpicks, which are minor in the grand scheme of things, it would have been nice to have more enemy types to fight, and it would have been nice to actually have a bit more of a unifying feel to the two runs. But on the whole, I really, really loved RE2 Remake. I feel like it is the superior of the two, despite my nitpicks. I love this direction of Leon and Claire. I want Code Veronica to be the next remake. I think, and there is the possibility of that, because they could adjust the timeline and have Claire and Chris doing the stuff in Code Veronica concurrently. I'm saying concurrently a lot today. At the same time, as RE4. They could just do that, and then that would make Wesker's involvement in 4 make a little bit more sense, because he's trying to pull together everything to set up 5, which obviously is going to be a remade game as well. That'll be a video for another time, and I kind of touched on a little bit last time we talked about RE. But once that's official, I'll probably want to talk about how they need to do things. But I was really happy with it. I feel like it's a very strong effort, and it led to RE4, which is the best of all the remakes. It is the best of the series, in my opinion. It is the greatest Resident Evil game that's ever been made. It does nearly everything flawlessly. And my biggest issue with the entire game, including Separate Ways, is that when Leon needs to knife a downed enemy, it is sometimes finicky to get the prompt to work. That's it. That's the only complaint I have about RE4 in its entirety. It's superlative how well they modernized RE4. And I was in the camp that didn't necessarily feel that RE4 needed to be remade yet. I felt that RE4 still held up. And in a lot of ways, RE4 Classic does. But I think that what Capcom really did with the remake is they brought it in line with kind of the vibe of 2 and 3, and I would even say the original RE remake. And made it more grounded and less fan servicey and more realistic, and really effectively built fantastic relationships with Leon and Ashley, and with Leon and Ada, and just made everything better. The other minor quibble I have is they made Sadler less funny. He's less campy in this game. He's excellently recast as a cult leader who drank too much of his own Kool-Aid and thinks that he is the bee's knees. Or I guess the Plaga's knees. Do Plagas even have knees? Anyway, and the new actor does a spectacular job at capturing this new vibe, but I miss some of the banter between Leon and Sadler. Your right hand comes off? I miss that. I miss a little bit of that. I am glad that the sense of humor still exists, that Leon is cracking quips. I'm happy about that. I think that he is spectacularly remolded into a far better character, a less sexist character, a more emotional, a more grounded, a more relatable human being. I could see this Leon being a real person, and that is saying a lot. I forget his last name, but Nick, who voiced him in both 2 and 4, did a spectacular job of bringing that same character and aging him up and making him still feel like the same Leon, just more mature and who's gone through some crap. I think that the casting in RE4 remake is perfect. Everyone is perfectly cast again. And Luis is a huge improvement. He's still the same slimy, sneaky ladies man, as he likes to refer to himself. But he doesn't flirt with Ashley awkwardly in a cutscene. in this game, which is much appreciated. He gets so much more time to shine, and his death actually has meaning. His death actually has impact on the dynamic of the game. You actually feel for his death. You were rooting for him, and that's a huge improvement over RE4, where he was just kind of like this goofball sexist, and didn't really make any effort to become friends. It just was a different thing. And then Ada's better in this game as well. She's got a completely different outfit. It's still a little weird, but it's more fitting and it's tactical. And the more I was playing the game, the more I liked it. It still captures the sense of her original outfit, but it makes more logic. It makes more logical sense. And I think the dynamic that she has with all of the people she interacts with is also really well done in separate ways. And I also like that Separate Ways made Ada feel like a different type of character. She uses her grapple hook to get around, and she can also yank shields and pull herself over to enemies if they're stunned. So she doesn't feel like a carbon copy of Leon, which is nice. And she's a lot of fun in her campaign. Her campaign is very fleshed out for a $10 expansion. It's what RE3 should have been. But there is just so much joy in RE4 and how they re-envisioned everything. And then the stuff that was missing out of Leon's campaign more or less made it into Ada's. So, like, those who were missing the laser room and U3 fight, that's all in Ada's campaign. There's probably a couple little things here and there that are missing, but the majority of what made RE4 Classic stand out is in RE4 Remake, one way or another. The biggest absence is probably the shipyard area for Ada's Separate Ways campaign in Classic. That is just not there at all. But it didn't need to be. They came up with a different special area for her to go into, which is a laboratory environment that actually looks like a laboratory environment. It's still kind of one of those weird idiosyncrasies of RE4, is that this is a cult that is basically running with a lot of medieval technology because it's very rural. But we have, like, Plaga development labs. But you don't really see that modernness in most of the game. They did do a better job with RE4 Remake to make it feel a little bit more modern on the island, but it still feels a little bit disconnected. But I do like Luis's lab is like ancient. It's ancient computers, and he's still got that virus or that anti-Plaga laser to work. It's really cool how that I think is really well done. There's just a lot of really good stuff in RE4. The melee feels really good. The new counter mechanic makes doing melee much more risk-reward, but far more reward than risk than it used to be. The knife just kind of was there to open boxes and, knife down enemies, but now you could actually use it effectively in different ways. So you can sneak up on enemies and do stealth kills. You can counter attacks. Projectile and melee, which is really nice. And you just have to keep an eye on its integrity, because it will degrade as you do stuff with it. Not as bad as RE2. RE2's knives really degraded very fast, but RE4 does a little bit of a better job, and you can use the merchant, who is wonderfully recast, and his shooting minigame is a delight, how they reinvented that whole thing. And threw in the classic RE4 intro music into that whole thing. That's just lovely. The game is full of love. That is a really big thing I can say about RE4 Remake, is it's full of love for the original game. You can tell in almost every moment playing it that the developers loved and wanted to show respect to the original game. And that, I think, is one of the bigger issues with 3, is that it didn't really feel like the people who were remaking 3 had that connection with it. to make it a proper update to 3. It just kind of felt like a half step from 2 with a couple changes. But I feel like 4 got the memo that they needed to do it perfectly. And for a remake of a game that's as beloved and respected and influential as RE4 Classic is, they pulled it off better than I think nearly anyone else has in terms of a remake of a game. It is one of the greatest games ever made. That's my opinion on RE4. It is very strongly my number 1 game of 2023. And I am still awestruck that I can say that with Tears of the Kingdom right there. Tears of the Kingdom, spending nearly 2 months in that world, and then I end up spending nearly a month in RE4 playing through it 3 times straight, and then the Separate Ways campaign, and feeling like it's the better game because of how excellently executed it is. I think I just have more things about Tears of the Kingdom that I wish were done a little bit differently than I do with RE4 Remake. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. We'll see. I'm going to be thinking about it a lot next month. But on the whole, Capcom killed it with those remakes. Even RE3, which has the most compromises, it has the most issues, it's still a good game. It's not bad. I didn't hate playing it. I just didn't enjoy it as much. And I don't probably plan to play it again, so I'm going to probably sell it. But RE2 Remake and RE4 Remake managed to exceed their original games. And you can't see them very well, but they're over there in my top shelf, hanging out with Street Fighter 6. Which is another wonderful, wonderful game that I'll talk about more when we do Dual Life Perspective and the game awards that I do. Is that what I'm going to call it from now on? The game awards that I do. Cracked myself up. Anyway, thank you for joining me as I chatted about RE some more. It will be done for a while, I think. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll be doing something for Thanksgiving. I'm not sure what exactly yet, but stay tuned. We'll be doing something. Till next time. Take care, friends.